Welcome, everybody, to the latest episode of True Believers here on the Fandom Podcast Network. Today, we are continuing our coverage of Secret Invasion. We don't know if your podcasters are Skrulls or not. We're not sure. We never are, but we are going to have a lot of fun talking about the third episode of Secret Invasion and have talk a lot about Easter eggs in this episode this week. But you know what? I cannot hunt for Skrulls alone. Now, his friends call him Reitzel, but I call him Kevin. He is, of course, the co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network, Mr. Kevin Reitzel.
No one ever calls me Reitzel. Skrull! I'm a super Skrull. That's what I am. I'm a super Skrull.
I'm afraid to ask what your powers are. So,
yes, I go there.
Speaking of superpowers, we got a guest this week helping us on the investigation, but we're keeping a close eye on him because he might have a little Skrullish tendencies in him as well. He is from the MCU's Bleeding Edge show on YouTube, Mr. Jeff Sloboda, or AKA True Knowledge.
What up, baby?
Welcome, Jeff.
Welcome.
It feels good. It feels good to be back quasi at home, bruh.
Yeah.
Let's see. It's a long time no see.
So you're cruising. You're not hosting for once, so you get to cruise along for the ride. But hey, since we're getting started,
me and Kyle.
Yeah. Since we're getting started here, before we get in too deep, I would like to kind of get your initial thoughts on Secret Invasion episodes 1 and 2 before we dive into episode 3 and what you've thought of the series so far, Jeff.
Well, just to be clear, this is my Secret Invasion section of my MCU notebook, and you see all the different tabs. Now, that is like my outlines for every show. That is like then my post, like your reactions and whatnot of my own from the reviews and whatnot, and the feedback I get from other creators and whatnot, like you mentioned, Den of Geeks, right? Whenever I pick up from them during the week going into the next episode, that's where I put that in. This time is going to be a separate section. I have to give you guys a new tab for my first guest appearance.
That's impressive.
Yeah,
there you go.
We're honored to be tabbed.
Now, please rephrase your question to me again, Kyle, so I can appropriately answer it.
So before we get started talking about episode 3, I am curious about what your initial thoughts on episodes 1 and 2 were. Just briefly, kind of, so we know where you're coming at going into episode 3 of Secret Invasion.
Well, I didn't think to look and see what my ratings were for episodes 1 and 2. I want to believe that I gave the first episode probably something. I mean, I dropped a 10 already. I know that I've dropped 110 out of the first 2 episodes. All right. And episode 3 was basically like their filler episode, I believe. If these Disney Plus Marvel series, usually right around episode 3 or 4 is right when you get your filler series, your filler episode, where things kind of swing. Right. You know what I mean? Like, it either goes where it's going to go. Either goes. It's like that video I play sometimes on our show, could be good, could be shit. Right. Well, there you go. Yeah. Well, if this is a filler episode, and I got hats off to John from the Mad Trivia Podcast, part of my team for our Secret Invasion reviews and whatnot episodically. He literally mentioned it right at the end of the episode. He's like, just so you know, guys, I think this is the filler episode of the show, as we're like fanning out, fanboy and girling out. So I'll put it to you this way: me and the whole cast, my team or whatever that I put together for Secret Invasion reviews that I'm going to have for the whole thing, we've all enjoyed it. Now, I won't bullshit you though. At the same time though, off air or whatnot, in personal dialogues, for instance, with Kendra, one of my new guests, whatnot, and everything, that's actually a writer for a couple of DC websites and does some gaming writing and some gaming magazines. Very good guest, good contributor. What's up, Kendra? She mentioned to me, well, why haven't we brought up the comic book accurate angle of any of this really heavily? Why haven't we? You know what I mean? Like you've brought it up that we were going to go there. Well, I've been putting it off, right?
There's no tie. That's the problem with this show. There's no real tie-ins.
There is
to comics because the comic is a totally different monster because they have so many characters in it that were into it. But just kind of going in, then Jeff, you're saying you're definitely all in on Secret Invasion.
I came in fresh. I knew in a 6-episode miniseries, there's no way they were going to flush out the Secret Invasion storyline in any comic accurate way. And then I also knew they were not going to continue it into the Marvels. It would be dead right there, right? Like they might come off it. They might spin in a different direction with it, right? And maintain certain aspects of it. But this will be the Secret Invasion event of the Marvel Cinematic Universe right here. I knew that going in. At that point, I just wanted to enjoy it.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see where you're coming from. But let's dive into the third episode and most recent episode, Secret Invasion, episode 3, Betrayed. Kevin, I'm going to phase shift us in if you would be kind enough to give a plot synopsis.
All right. First, you got to go see the episode. Make sure you watch this because the spoilers are coming. All right. Plot description here for Secret Invasion, episode 3, Betrayed. All right. Gravik reveals to the Skrull Council that he intends to create super Skrulls with special abilities using the powered DNA. He also explains that he has sent rebels to infiltrate the Royal Navy in order to launch missiles at a United Nations aircraft. Gravik meets with Talos to negotiate a parley, but discussion breaks down when the former threatens to kill Gaia. Gaia secretly sends Talos information about the Royal Navy attack. Fury, angry that Talos allowed so many Skrulls to infiltrate Earth, reluctantly asked Talos to help him stop Gravik. They contact Fallsworth and learn the name of the Naval Commander Headquarters officer in charge, Commodore Robert Fairbanks. Fury and Talos break into Fairbanks' home and interrogate him, learning that he is a Skrull. It provokes Talos into killing him. Talos contacts Gaia, who acquires Fairbanks' authorization code so they can abort the missile launch in time. Gaia attempts to run away, but Gravik, who suspects her of betrayal, shoots her and leaves her for dead. Meanwhile, Priscilla secretly contacts an unknown person wishing to speak to Gravik, but is denied.
Okay, guys. So, Kevin, I'm going to start with you. What were your watching this episode? What were your first initial reactions to this episode?
I feel like it's treading water, and then they're leaving us with a second main person that they've killed in the last 3 episodes. Supposedly. Of course, we got Skrulls everywhere, and anyone could be a Skrull. They could lean on that. So I don't know. Underwhelmed. I'll be honest with you. Be underwhelmed as I am with this series thus far. And I'm afraid of this series now that where we are after 3 and how it's going to supposedly wrap up in the next 3. That's where I'm standing with it right now.
Jeff, what about you? What were your initial reactions at the end of this episode when you watched it for the first time?
Let me just make a point clearly before I answer that, and that's just I want to make sure I distinctly put this out there. One difference between my lens going into this and with every episode I watch and review it versus you guys possibly, or yours, Kevin, or yours, Kyle, is the fact that as I just showed you that Last of Us poster, right? Mm-hmm. I have been reviewing everything under the fucking sun for the last year, right? Everything from Andor to The Last of Us to Willow. Oh my God, Jesus, never again, please God. Thank you, it's deleted. No, but literally everything. I've been doing everything. Right. The House of the Dragon. Right. Look, at that point, I'm sorry, but it's not. We're the MCU's bleeding edge. But at that point, I start to get into a place where, especially when we haven't gotten any Marvel for a while, right? I'm excited going into the series from jump at that point. Like you asked earlier, Kyle, about how I felt about episode 1 and 2. I haven't gotten any Marvel in a long time, man. Other than the films we've gotten, Guardians was pretty good. But I was excited. You can't blame me. I'm a fan. On top of that, again, my lens, I think, is just a little bit adjusted just because, sure, I read the comic books, storylines of both Secret Invasion events. But still, at the end of the day, though, I've become more transfixed and focused a lot of times, especially because of Andor, for instance, and Last of Us, a lot of these HBO Studios productions, where I'm really paying more attention to how scenes are being played out, the flow of episodes, cinematography, casting, right? Storyline per episode, the titles connecting to episodes, all these intrinsic things are mattering to me more. And so to some extent, I just want to say that I may enjoy some of these episodes more than y'all, simply because I'm not as focused as the Marvel aspect or the comic book aspect of what I expect from that. I'm more focused on how well done I think the series is, and I do think it's very well done. Now, episode 3, look, again, it was the weakest of the 3 episodes without question, right? They stepped back from Fury purposely, right, to detract from him a little bit and whatnot, and take the sunlight off him for one episode, right? Kind of sidelined him and went into the secondary character, aspect, try to kind of extend their arcs. I like the Gravik Talos scene. I thought that was epic. That alone I thought was epic, right? Now but that's one key good thing. Overall, as Kevin said, the storyline itself is flimsy. Okay, like what they gave us compared to episodes 1 and 2, it is I don't want to say it's a slowdown, it's a drop off in storyline quality.
I think that can be a fair assessment. My initial reactions were I just felt like this episode was moving at a little bit more of a slower pace, and yet it felt like it didn't give us a lot. Plus, it was the shortest episode of the series so far, clocking in at only 47 minutes compared to where the other 2 episodes have been almost 60 full minutes. Of course, you got to factor in credit time and all that stuff. But even still, this was a good 10 minutes shorter than any of the other episodes. This was something, and I'll get into it in a little bit, but it was on a rewatch and doing some research for this episode that I realized there's a lot more to this episode than what was initially there, but you had to be paying attention. And I think this was kind of the issue with this episode, was things were moving at such a pace to where you were kind of getting your brain checked out of the episode because it wasn't holding you in. And there's a lot of little Easter eggs that happened in this episode that you missed because of that. And to me, that's a little bit on the writers. I'm with you, Jeff. This show is phenomenally acted. That scene between Fury and Talos, or between Gravik and Talos in the cafe, was intense and really powerful. And everybody is doing a phenomenal job on the acting side. It's definitely, I think, the writers and the storytelling side that have had a little bit of issue with pacing, is the best way I can put it. And so I'm going to be curious to see how this plays out over the next 3 episodes. But with that, guys, let's talk about the cast of Secret Invasion and who were maybe our standouts of this episode. Kevin, who was there anybody on just in their performances alone or in their characters that stood out to you this week?
Ben Mendelsohn. He's been the bright spot of this series. He's actually, to be honest with you, he is stealing the show over Samuel Jackson, because Nick Fury's, whatever version of Nick Fury this is, I'm not with it. This is not the Nick Fury one. I'm getting like Luke Skywalker Last Jedi vibes here. I'm getting the beaten down heroes that we don't want to see. We want to see these guys, no matter what age they are, still kicking ass. And Ben Mendelsohn, to me, is stealing this entire series so far. He is absolutely killing every episode he's in. And he is standing up to Nick Fury's character and just lobbing him right back at him. And, asking, Nick Fury to say, that he needs him, I want to hear you say that, and letting him know that, I was always there, you were using us, and all your up your climb of the super spy ladder. It's just fantastic. And then of course the scenes with Gravik as well were just powerful, especially when his daughter came into play. It was great.
Now, Jeff, what about you? What stood out for you on, as far as I saw you nodding your head in a positive as Kevin was talking about Ben Mendelsohn. Obviously, I agree with that completely. He's been probably the star of the show to me.
You could literally just copy. You could just edit and copy out what Kevin just said and whatnot and everything, and then just superimpose it over my voice, and I'll make some stupid Jar Jar face. That as my response. No. Mendelsohn. Look, Mendelsohn. I'm watching Rogue One right now. Like, that's what I was doing. I came from the garage, where I'm still working on my secondary studio area, right? And I'm watching Rogue One to get myself like reconnected and whatnot before I do my Andor Part 1, Season 1 recap and breakdown, right? Because I want to do a lot of heavy connecting, right, at the beginning and at the end of all the parts, right? Having to do with the Rogue One and Andor connections. I see a lot of parallels in the storylines. I like Tony Gilroy a lot. I do. But either way, so I just got done watching Ben Mendelsohn killing it over there. All right. You know what I'm saying? So, no, that's why I was laughing, because I'm thinking to myself, Kevin's talking about Ben Mendelsohn. I'm like, wait a minute. 2 minutes ago, was I just watching Ben Mendelsohn as like an Imperial officer or whatever, whatnot? But No. Listen, he look. We can disagree on whatever we want to here, and in good faith. But I thought that Gravik was strong. I thought that the actor, I believe his name is
Kingsley Ben-Adir.
Kingsley Ben-Adir has done a great job. Now, I'll be honest with you, and it's always, I think it's usually a good thing, but sometimes it does surprise me when I come in to review these episodes and my panel doesn't agree with me at all on stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I come in and I'm like, oh man, I thought Gravik was. I think one of my things I wrote down on my outline for the last episode was that I thought that Gravik, this actor portraying Gravik, he's probably the best villain through 3 episodes, besides maybe in Moon Knight, right? Where, of course, I mean, Moon Knight being whatever it is. What's his name? I forgot the name of the actor again that played the quasi villain of the show.
Yeah,
he was outstanding. He really was. I thought he did a great job.
Ethan Hawke, right?
Yeah, Ethan Hawke. Yeah, that's
he was great. Yeah, I gave him my Monica Rambeau award for the series. I did. No, but honestly, and who I'm going to give that to this one, I don't even know yet. There's 3 more episodes to go. But Gravik, that scene was so powerful between Gravik and Talos. So Gravik is afraid of Talos. He is physically afraid of him. You know what I'm saying? Like that's very. I think that's important to point out. You know, I mean, that's one key thing I took from that. Besides the fact that it's shot so well. The background of the scene is so great with the white, right? Really, to be honest with you, it's funny because in the trailer, it's supposed to be so shocking to have all the graphics pop up around him and whatnot and all that. That didn't even affect me. I didn't even care when that happened. I was too entranced by the dialogue between the two of them. You know what I'm saying? Whatnot, right? Back and forth and everything. Talos is no joke, man. Ben Mendelsohn's Talos is no joke, and him and Fury are buds, man. Like they're best buddies. So like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I enjoyed the look, let's be honest with you. Feige flat out said that this series was a vehicle for them. Mendelsohn and Samuel Jackson.
Yeah. Mendelsohn has been nailing it all this whole season.
Oh, yeah.
I think for me too, and Kevin, I've been riding this train since Secret Invasion started. Another fun appearance of Olivia Colman in this episode too, with her new owl, Nicholas Fury. And just, what I love about Olivia Colman is that her character stands up with anybody, just toe to toe with anybody, isn't afraid to fire right back. And that's been good. And I want to echo what you've been saying about Kingsley Ben-Adir, because at Gravik, I think to sit across a table and have a scene with just basically him and Ben Mendelsohn going back and forth, and Ben Mendelsohn being such an amazing, accomplished actor, and to be able to be toe to toe with him in that kind of scene.
How old is Kingsley Ben-Adir? What's he got to be? What? He's under 30 years old.
I believe, yeah, he's either late 20s, early 30s. So, yeah, but he hasn't been around that long. So, yeah, I got to give that credit to an amazing acting performance there as well. But moving along here, I'm gonna give Kevin. It might have been my birthday yesterday, but I actually have a little present for you this week, sir, because we're going to be talking about one of your favorite things. Iron Man 3.
Oof.
So usually we talk about a little bit about the review article from Geek, because we feel like we put in a lot of information. But I found this article by Tom Chapman of Geek, and I caught my eye because we've talked about how the MCU has a way of redeeming things from the past that people might not have liked as much. So in part of his article, he had the Iron Man 3 problem. Much like how Secret Invasion is an MCU-ified version of the 2008 comic crossover the same name, Iron Man 3 attempted to adapt Warren Ellis and Adi Gravinov's Extremis miniseries of 2005 through 2006, but got itself sidetracked. Serving as something of a sequel to the 2012's Avengers, Iron Man 3 had the odds stacked against it. In just 5 years, we'd had a whole trilogy of Iron Man movies before we'd seen Guardians of the Galaxy, Doctor Strange, or Captain Marvel. However, even if you remove iconic scenes like the Malibu Mansion attack and the fact that the MCU's first Christmas movie, it is still clear to see what Iron Man 3 could have been. It's the only Iron Man movie that really dived into the man behind the suit, although Iron Man 3 didn't quite break into the realms of the acclaimed Demon in a Bottle comic art, where we dealt with we did deal with Tony's PTSD after he went on a suicide mission into space at the end of the Avengers. Both Hall and Black have spoken out about how Maya Hansen was handled, and after Hall claimed she was missold her reduced role, Black confirmed his original plan for Hansen was to be the big bad. Black told Uprocks how Disney execs were unconvinced about the idea of a female villain thanks to its potential lack of toy sales. Whether the sweetest pie Hansen giving us a jaw-dropping villain turn would have worked or not, there's bad blood about her character's underwhelming handling. Instead, Extremis and Killian are two completely forgettable parts of the MCU's sometimes murky past. The ghost of Iron Man 3 haunts the MCU, and in Black's own words, the All Hail the King one-shot was created to undo his Mandarin twist. Still, the dangling threads of Iron Man 3 present some interesting opportunities. If we're revisiting the idea of extremists in Secret Invasion, there's a potential to explore more of advanced idea mechanics. Despite AIM being up there with Hydra in terms of Marvel villainry, we're also moved past Killian and decided to ignore MODOK's potential connection to the shadowy think tank. Currently, Secret Invasion seems like a dumping ground for, hey, remember this? Ideas like episodes throwaway mention of Black Widow's Dreykov, Ray Winston, or the relevance of Cull Obsidian from Thanos' Black Order. Much like Shang-Chi's Mandarin retcon, Secret Invasion is seemingly just a way to thaw the frosty reception of Iron Man 3. But alongside trying to bring Black Widow into the fold, Bradstreet is doing a stellar job of trying to redeem underrated Marvel movies. Well, someone has to. So, Kevin, I'm just going to sit back and let you react to this little article by one Mr. Tom Chapman.
Yeah, Tom still doesn't like Iron Man 3, I can tell. And that's okay, because I'm in the minority of Iron Man 3 being one of my favorite of the Marvel MCU movies. And of course, as I've always said before, and I will say it again for those of you that don't know, I come at an angle at Iron Man 3 because I don't know anything about the comics. I don't know what Extremis were. I didn't know the whole deal with the Mandarin. And I liked the personal twist of the Mandarin, where we had this face that was supposed to Ben Kingsley's character as the Mandarin, and then he was just a puppet. And I know fans that were obviously familiar with the comic book hated that. And I like the film on top of it for other reasons. I like that we do see Tony's PTSD in this movie. I like the fact that he bonds with Rhodey in this. It's a very Shane Black film of it was kind of like a buddy cop film if you think about it. And yes, I know it takes place during Christmas, but it's not a Christmas movie because there's no traditional Christmas themes in it, and I'm not going to go down the Die Hard rabbit hole with that. But I like the idea of Harley, the kid, and kind of becoming an apprentice. And I really enjoyed the series as it was shown as an MCU movie, not we took versions of it from the MCU series and then we changed things to piss off a lot of people. And so I like it for that reason itself, and also the relationship between him and Pepper strengthened that one as well. And that was a big part of it for me as well. As what I see the tie into this episode, it makes sense. There's things that happened in Infinity War or Endgame that referred back to Thor: The Dark World, which made us rethink certain parts of that, blah blah blah, and that they want to take certain parts that didn't do quite well with fans in the MCU, and let's try to make more sense of them, or maybe rewrite them, or whatever. Or how it be, like Shang-Chi jumped in on the 10 Rings thing a little bit on that, and I get that, but I don't think that they have to do things like this to make Iron Man 3 better. I just make the suggestion is look at it for how it's presented and judge it again on that, not because you're disappointed that they didn't follow the comic rules as the way that you were hoping that they would. If I judged movies more on that, then I would hate all the Harry Potter films. And that's not the case, because I judge those films based on what they decide to do with their interpretation. And I like what they're trying to do with the Extremis here, as we got a little tease in this, which I know you'll talk about a little bit on that. But Iron Man 3 is in my top 5 Marvel MCU films of all time, and I stand by that.
Now, Jeff, this brings me to a point I want to ask you about that's related into this article is the fact it's something I think the MCU has done pretty well is take things from some of their movies that maybe didn't work as well as they hoped, but somehow finding ways later on to at least take aspects of those movies, bring them up again, and make them important to where it makes that movie feel like it's more tied into the MCU. What do you think of how Marvel kind of handles that with whether it's here in Secret Invasion, because they mentioned several things which we're going to talk about here shortly, but just how they've taken certain aspects of films that maybe didn't rank higher up on the MCU pantheon and used them in other films to kind of increase their value.
I think that, well, for one thing, I think that there's multiple. It's not that when they do it, it always just like kills it. You know what I'm saying? Whatnot, or redeems everything. You know what I mean? Whatnot, right? It's that sometimes it's a vehicle that's used to actually to sort of give validity to the concept that was once looked at as like Clown World almost. You know what I mean? Like, oh well, that sucked. Oh, wait a minute. Like, hold on, like, now they're connecting this to that. You know what I'm saying? Whatnot, like they're even mentioning it in this dialogue in this scene. I mean, for some people, it's simply just maybe kind of like makes them smile for a moment and makes them look back. At the end of the day, the interconnectivity of the MCU is however you want to rank the films, whatever you want to say about different phases, whatever. The interconnectivity in the Infinity Saga is one of the most core fundamental aspects of what made it what it is. You know what I'm saying? Not right. That interactivity allowed there to be that build up to Endgame, or else you don't have it. You know what I'm saying? Well, not right. Like realistically. So the way I look at it is like this. For one thing, considering the current state of sort of, I guess, the reception or the enthusiasm for the MCU right now amongst the fandom, I feel that it's always positive, right? To remind anybody, any of them, or any of us in general, to give us some fan service. Remind us of Phase 1. Remind us of the original 6, right? Give us stuff that that relates to them in any capacity, even if it is just a flashback scene of Episode 3 of Secret Invasion where you hear the villain Dracoff from the Black Widow film mentioned by name by Fury's wife, right? Now, again, do I think that's gonna like somehow really like massively change anybody's opinion on the Black Widow film? No, but it was great fan service. It really was great connection, great tie-in, and you're right, and there is redemption there. There is, it can at times actually flush some stuff out to where people do open their eyes up a little bit more, right? And they're willing to maybe take a second look at something like Iron Man 3, for instance, like that, Kevin holds so dearly, to him and whatnot and everything. Maybe some small thing like that can be that injection or that motivation for a fan, right? To be like, you know what, I'm going to go back and watch Iron Man 3 tomorrow night, right? And I'm going to deep dive it, what I'm saying, and really pay attention to it. And you know what usually ends up happening? Because I think you all both know. Usually when you go back and watch this stuff and whatnot, you end up liking it more than you freaking did the last time you watched it. You enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and you make some good points, Jeff, that actually going to tie into our next phase. So I'm going to shift us over. So we've been talking about Easter eggs and such. So we're shifting into our next page, which is our trivia and Easter egg section. I have one fun piece of trivia about Secret Invasion that I found out, and then we'll get into some of the Easter eggs and some of the points that Jeff was making. The trivia is when in Episode 3, when Nick Fury is asked about his retirement plans, Fury says, "Well, I never cared much for golf, so I'm thinking I may take up revenge." However, in real life, Samuel Jackson is in fact, an avid golfer. He often negotiates a clause in his contracts that allows him to play golf during film shoots. So that is not a case of real life reflecting the show, but I just found that to be a fun little piece of information. But getting back to now the Easter eggs of this episode, and when I talked earlier about having done a rewatch of this, there are a lot of little things in this episode. Yes, it may have felt like a filler episode, but they actually drop a lot of key pieces. And I guess maybe because this is a spy show, they're trying to have a little fun and make sure that you better be paying attention or you're going to miss something. And there was several key pieces in this episode that you need to probably go watch if you rewatch it if you didn't catch it. And the first being Black Widow mentioned, as Jeff just said, the flashback scene, which shows a meeting between Vera and Fury, with the former providing the latter with some vital information that references another section of the MCU. After presenting Fury with a brown envelope, Vera remarks, "This should put Dreykov's men on their heels." Dreykov, of course, is the head of the Red Room and the villain of the Black Widow movie, played by Ray Winstone. Given the former conflicts between Natasha Romanoff and Dreykov, the Easter egg to S.H.I.E.L.D.'s conflict with the Red Room is a neat way of connecting Secret Invasion's self-contained story to former MCU events. This was a fun little Easter egg drop, and if you weren't paying a lot of attention, you might have missed it because it was in a fairly casual line. And I think, again, with this episode, that's one of the things that you're going to have to go back and pay attention. And I have a feeling this might be a trend for Secret Invasion going through. But there was more Easter eggs besides that.
I missed that one, by the way, just so you know.
Yeah. Of course, this one was pretty hard not to miss. But we see for the first time a Super Skrull, and it's Gravik himself, showing that he has added Extremis to his DNA, because during his conversation with Talos, Gravik mentions Gaia, prompting the former to impale the latter with a knife in a John Wick-esque sense there, Kevin. After Talos leaves, Gravik simply pulls his hand free from the blade before his Extremis powers kick in and allow him to heal from his wound. While episode 2 hinted at Extremis powers being part of Secret Invasion, this episode showed them in action and to how they were visually portrayed in Iron Man 3 with the same glowing orange and healing effects. Kevin, you're our Iron Man 3 guy. Were you a little bit excited to see this, especially with the hint dropped in episode 2?
I didn't catch it at first, but on my rewatch I did. I was like, oh, that looks like the Extremis healing thing or something like that. So yeah. And when he healed immediately, I had to remember, I'm like, can Skrulls do that? They just transform. They don't have a healing thing. And so, yeah, I didn't catch until my second rewatch.
Now, Jeff, you were talking about this earlier. I think, with the hint of Extremis last week, and now we know how they're doing Super Skrulls by adding these powers that they're able to get the DNA or whatever to mute with their own Skrull DNA. I think it's very interesting, and I especially think it's extra interesting with Extremis, considering how it didn't necessarily react all that well to human DNA. There was a pretty big price for it if you overused it. But with Skrull DNA, I'm wondering if Extremis, Jeff, is even going to be that more dangerous.
I don't know, but as an aside, I will say that I believe that I know I personally was wondering what was going on in the first episodes with Gaia, right? Who in my previews for Secret Invasion and whatnot, everything my preview shows, I for sure, because this is what we were being told, was that she was going to be playing Abigail Brand, right, from the comics and whatnot, everything, that she was going to be Abigail Brand. Now, obviously, she's not Abigail Brand, but through the Extremis, I believe that because am I going too far ahead by mentioning that I do believe that at the end of episode 3 that I do believe that she like does it. I think she does do like a quick version.
We're gonna get to Gaia here in a little bit, so let's table that for now.
I'll hold back. I'll table it. Okay. All I'm gonna say is I'll save that. But yeah, no, I liked it. I think that the infusion of it, piece by piece, just like like in a slight way like that is neat. Again, it feeds into the entire vibe of the series, of the sort of spy, the sort of Captain America Winter Soldier vibe, which I don't know how I've heard multiple people make that, not just me, make that claim that there are themes in this.
I think even Kevin Feige has dropped that that's one of the goals they were trying for with the series, was to get back to a little bit of that Winter Soldier type spy thriller vibe.
Oh, the director too said that flat out that he drew from Captain America Winter Soldier, among other things, among some classic 70s like spy films that he watched and whatnot, everything, right? Now there's also the fact that just to take a second here and beyond Extremis, that we don't know who are Skrulls still. We don't know. There's so many different interesting things popping off right now. I mean, honestly, that at that point, I have to believe full-heartedly there's a lot more for us to be revealed. And again, I totally instead of mentioning Extremis from this perspective, I'll just say that how they decided to go ahead and do the Super Skrull thing, I get why people in the fandom could be unhappy with this. I do understand that. Right? I find it to be personally clever how they went about it. It's neat, I think, the way that they induced it and came up with this version of making this happen. But at the same time, though, I understand and get why some people are looking at this and they're saying or saying out publicly, this is not what I expected. This is not Secret Invasion. You know, they're going too far almost in a way from from the source material, right? Now, and I just wanted to take that opportunity to point that out and whatnot, that this is a spot where I feel open to, put it out there that I do understand that. We haven't fleshed it out yet much in our reviews. I know you guys have.
Yeah. Well, I think from that perspective, the most important thing to remember where we're at in the MCU right now is, yes, the comics are a guideline to go by, but the MCU has established enough of its own history that they've got to work within what they've created themselves within their history. They can't just be word for word with the comics. But you were talking about some of the spy aspect of this too, which leads me into a couple Easter eggs about our favorite super spy, Nick Fury, who apparently reached his success with a little Skrull assistance. One of the smaller Easter eggs in episode 3 comes before Talos and Fury's mission during the episode's climax. The two are shown talking in a car on the way to their location, with Talos referencing Fury's career as a spy from the MCU's past. Talos confirms that the only reason Fury rose through the ranks was because of the Skrulls and the information they fed him, also linking to the mention of Dreykov earlier in the episode. The reference contextualizes Fury's power in the MCU, as the Easter egg hints that most of Fury's covert information came from the Skrulls themselves. Now, we not only had this one, but a little fun thing to keep note of, because it's going to tie into our next Easter egg. Nobody calls me Nick. Throughout Captain Marvel, something continuously brought up for how Nick Fury could determine a Skrull was whether they called him Fury or not. In the 2019 film, Fury revealed to Carol that nobody called him Nicholas or Nick, simply Fury. In Secret Invasion Episode 3, a Skrull imitates Talos, causing him to call Fury by his first name, Nick. This stirs Fury's suspicion, allowing him to get the upper hand and free Talos, as nobody calls me Nick, Bob. This is not only a neat Easter egg to Captain Marvel, but it is also used similarly, as it helped Fury determine a Skrull infiltrator. So, Kevin, obviously, Fury did get by with a little help from his alien friends. And also, this nobody calls me Nick is going to play into the next Easter egg we have. But I want to, like I said, should he be giving the Skrulls a cut of his shield paycheck?
I'm a fan of Captain Marvel, and I liked the Nick Fury that we got in that one, and the reference to the name was good, because it's one of those things where, like, when someone's not who they say they are, and there's certain little idiosyncrasies of the way that they say things arouses suspicion. And that's always a fun trope, especially in espionage type situations with movies or TV series. That's when a bad guy or a good guy messes up, and someone's like, "Nah, that's not how it would be done. Or that's not how it's said." That's always fun to do. And with Nick, that's an interesting thing to do, because no one calls him Nick.
Yeah, exactly. Jeff, what about you? What did you think of the fact that the Skrulls are basically trying to take a little credit for Nick Fury's rise through the ranks?
Well, we don't tangibly know. I agree. Look. I mean, Talos is not the type of guy to say things for no reason. The Skrulls are a very serious society or culture. Their culture is one of honesty, I believe. Like, they have some very, very really traditional values that they stick with. Right? Even the ones that have been on Earth for quite a long time, they still refer back to, like, a lot of, like, the original Skrull culture concepts, that their fundamentals. And I think that I believe that, for one thing, it's interesting. It gives more evidence, and it adds more indication and reasoning as to why Gravik would be so personally pissed off at Fury, right? Like, to the point where it's almost like his desire to take over the Earth, and not only that, but also wipe out the human race, since they're going to do it anyway, right? Is almost like parallel to his hatred for Fury. and desire to, like, not maybe parallel, but it's there. Like, it's still, you'd think your villain would be 100% down for the game, for the main task. His personal, not vendetta, but his personal interest in Fury, it's intriguing. It adds to the intrigue, right? To me, it does. The more little tidbits they give us of these flashbacks are great. They're really well used, I think.
Yeah, they're not overdoing the flashbacks either.
No.
And you bring up some interesting stuff with Gravik, and that goes back to the flashbacks because he did work for Fury. He's one of the Skrulls that volunteered to work for Fury. So who knows what the history of his relationship with Fury is, and I think that's going to be something that is going to get played out in the future episodes. But speaking of something else that is going to get played out in the future episodes, I am pretty sure I can confirm this now. I am calling Rhodey a Skrull. Rhodey calling. At the end of Secret Invasion Episode 3, it is revealed that Fury's wife is working for Gravik. Vera calls somebody asking to speak to Gravik, with the voice on the other end being a subtle Easter egg to a Secret Invasion Episode 2 theory. The theory in question was that Secret Invasion's Rhodes was a Skrull, something that Episode 3 seemingly confirms, as the voice on the phone seems to be Rhodey himself. The episode does not confirm this, solidifying Rhodey's voice as an MCU Easter egg, which will likely lead to a big reveal and confrontation between Fury and Rhodes in Secret Invasion's future. Now, a couple things to add to this. Even IMDb credits that voice to John Cheadle at this point. And if you remember, Fury talks about having an inline to a high-ranking U.S. official that's been replaced by a Skrull and who's in London. And I went back and actually watched the conversation between Rhodey and Fury from Episode 2. And what does Rhodey do? He calls him Nick.
Oh, Nick. Yeah, I was wondering when Kyle, when you were going to drop that.
So I'm feeling pretty confident. I'm going to say with 99% certainty, the Rhodey that we have seen so far in Secret Invasion is a Skrull, Kevin.
Yeah, you mentioned this before, and I wouldn't be surprised either. Someone in power like that, because I had mentioned that the moment between Rhodey and Nick was kind of it's a trope where someone who is a former comrade or fellow soldier, or whatever it is, goes high in the ranks of some type of political situation. Then they become less of a friend and an ally because they have people over their heads telling them what to do. And so they don't become as friendly or nice, and the whole Nick thing was kind of interesting. I didn't catch it at first, but this is the land of the Skrulls and shape-shifting aliens, and you got to assume, and that's what they're trying to do. They're like, who's not a Skrull, basically, is the guessing game now.
Yeah. Jeff, what about you? Are you convinced that Rhodey is a Skrull?
I knew it from jump. The minute he called him Nick, right there. Yeah. No, I flat out. I didn't need to listen to anybody else's stuff or look at IMDb or whatever. Whatnot. I just said it right during the review. I said that is not Rhodes. That's a Skrull. Fury knew he was a Skrull. His dialogue with him does not sound like Nick Fury at all.
Really didn't sound like Rhodey either, to be honest.
Whether this is broken Fury or whatever, what do you want to call him or whatever, right? Hidden, that hid in the space station and whatnot, and is now being sort of reborn or being revitalized, right? Which is what's happening across the span of this series. He's going to evolve into a sort of different Fury that we've never gotten before, right? Not the one that we used to be, yet not the broken one, but a new one. A maybe more wizened one, and one that they're probably going to end up having then assemble our next Avengers squad, I would assume. I don't see why he wouldn't remain and they wouldn't keep him around to do that. I believe that this will be a bridge to that, right? And then in Captain America 4, you'll actually see it happen in real life. If things look the way they do, that's going to be the vehicle where they're going to go ahead and have that core group laid out. But no, I knew Rhodes was a Skrull right there from jump. The president wasn't; it was him. The dialogue, he probably would have had to be killed, if not for that he had to maintain his fake role in the government, right? Mm-hmm. Would have probably had him killed right there. Everything, whatnot, right? Well, he did, and in all honesty, so I knew from jump, and in all honesty too, I don't believe that Fury's wife is working for Graphic at all. You have to remember, I believe that I forget her name again. It's
Go. I'm going to cut you stop because we're going to talk about that here in just a minute, here, Jeff. So
okay.
Hold your thoughts. I have one other thought, guys, that just has come up on the random as we've been talking about this that I want to bring up. I don't know about you guys, but I am done with the look of Nick Fury like he's working on the dock. I need some classic Fury look back here sooner than later in this episode. I understand the point of having him change his look, but I am definitely tired of the Deadliest Catch look for Nick Fury that he's been working now through 3 episodes. We need to get back to some eye patch. We need to get back to some leather jacket badassness here.
Yeah, his beard is looking awful. Absolutely awful. I mean,
he's got that
I don't know.
bad retirement beard.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's all he can do, man. Kevin, what are you gonna do, bro? If all you can grow is a Keanu Reeves beard.
Oh, God, shave it then. Jesus Christ, it's looking horrible. It's like if it's a fake beard, it's horrible. It's
Keanu could rock his shitty beard, his like weak ass beard that anybody can.
Yeah, exactly. But guys, we got a couple more plot points I want to get into. Into phase 3, which is we look at some other aspects of the plot that maybe we haven't looked at. And the first aspect I want to look into is Gaia. Is Gaia dead or alive? That is the question that people are talking about on the internet. Is like, and how would you cast Emilia Clarke if you're only going to put her in 3 episodes? So before I go to either of you gentlemen, I'm just going to throw it out there. Gaia is not dead. And I think there's a very key thing in this episode that will tell you that. If you go back to where they are in Bob Fairbanks's home trying to stop the missile attack, and when Talos shoots the Skrull that's replaced Fairbanks, he shoots him on the right-hand side and he dies instantly. When they pan back to see where Gaia was shot, she was shot on the left-hand side in kind of the upper quadrant. Now, plus, Skrulls are shapeshifters. They've already insinuated that they can maneuver their internal organs around. So you don't cast Emilia Clarke and kill her off after 3 episodes. I am of the boat that Gaia is still alive and has a bigger part to play in this series, Kevin.
Yeah, I think the question is, how is she alive? Does she take any of the super Skrull serum extremities or whatever they're called? Did she do that? Did she do something did she do something to protect herself from the gunshot? Because killing her off makes no sense right now.
Jeff, what about you? What are your feelings on the situation with Gaia? And is she dead or is she alive? I think to me it's pretty obvious.
Come on, in both trailers, there's scenes that have not occurred yet with her, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so we already know that she's not dead. Again, she had time. I don't know if she got the full dose. I don't think she got the full dose of like the new Super Skrull serum or they have or whatever and whatnot, that whole thing. But she got partially some of it, right? So of course she's going to survive. As I was saying earlier, they're going to at least give her the power similar to that of Abigail Brand, her mutant powers in terms of being able to, give off heat, very high temperatures of heat into almost fire or flame through her hands, and then be able to burn through things. Essentially, right? That's what she can do. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's how they manifest. She can't shoot anything out or anything like that. Yeah. She can punch somebody with it.
Basically, what the abilities Extremis gives somebody.
What Extremis would give you, yes, almost essentially, right? Yeah. So that will line up with that. But as a side note, I loved seeing. I really wasn't sure where her real firm ties lied. If she was 50-50ing things between Gravik and I really wasn't sure. Until Talos picked up that cell phone and then talked to her that directly, right? And just and activated her the way he did, and she just went into full on like on a mission mode to handle her business. I was like, oh, okay, she's been planted up in here this whole time, and Gravik basically knew it too, because he basically doesn't even trust anybody. I don't think, right, but. Honestly, I think that we're going to see a lot more from her in episodes 4 through 5 and 6. This was just going to be this was the end of this. The third tier of this episode was sort of her opening shot, in the series where they're finally going to unveil her to us.
No, I think those are good points as well. I'm really curious to see what direction they're going to go with Gaia. I don't believe she's dead either, and I think there's going to be there's a lot of intrigue in coming up in these last few episodes, but there is one more thing that is giving us some intrigue as well, guys, and I want to get into that point now. Whose side is she on? Whose side is Vera on? I think this is actually a little bit more in the murky gray than it is anything else. And the reason why I say this is this: we obviously get a very powerful emotional conversation between her and Fury in this episode, where she talks about how she was just about healed from Fury being snapped out of existence to all of a sudden him blipping back, and she had to deal with that. And then actually more painful to her was him just basically abandoning her, going up to the Saber station and not really coming back. And he's asking her, like, I need to know who I'm dealing with. And you're like, you're dealing with me. I had to go back to being me. And that plays out even more so later in the episode when we see her get a phone call. She leaves. She goes to a security deposit box, and there's a gun inside. And I have no doubt in my mind that gun was put there for her with the intent that they want her to kill Fury. She can get close enough to actually kill Fury. And then, of course, at the end of the episode, she gets the phone call. We hear Don Cheadle's voice at the end of it saying she's in this meet at this such and such a place, and then the episode ends. So the question is, I think even more so than Gaia at this point, is where does Vera stand? Yes, she is his wife, and it's obvious she has feelings for him, but she also has a very strong belief in what's best for the Skrulls, and also a woman kind of scorned here, Kevin.
Yeah, I'm gonna need a better reason for her to turn her back on Nick Fury, even though he was away and all that kind of stuff, because they're laying the groundwork for the beginning of the relationship and the courting and being married and all that kind of stuff. There's something weird going on here, and if they're writing her up to betray Nick on this, from what I've seen so far, I'm having trouble accepting that. So I'm curious to see where that's going to go.
Yeah, it seemed like she did have a problem with having the gun, and she was trying to put it back in the safe deposit box. Jeff, what about you? How are you feeling with this current situation?
I don't believe she works for Gravik at all. I think that if you remember in the flashback in episode 2, where very poignantly you hear Talos say, I trust this man, right? Which I thought was very powerful. I really did. Either way, basically right even there, you see that Vera, sort of favors Gravik, right? Like she's the one that pushes him forward to Fury and says, he's useful, or whatever and whatnot. I think she becomes a mother figure to Gravik. And to some extent, I think that in some way, Fury ends up becoming a father figure to Gravik. There's more of a personal dynamic and relationship between him and Gravik that they revealed to us yet. And at that point, I believe that that's why she would have access to Gravik or be able to contact him in any way, shape, or form, would simply be because, again, she is a Skrull, right? They did both work for Fury during that spy program. And she's probably just sort of like hung out in neutral with Gravik, respecting that she has no desire to be a part of his, bullshit or anything. Right? Just wants to be left alone, maybe, right? Maybe in some way she just wants to guide him, or now that she understands the real depth of what's going on, right? Wants to try to see if she can talk some sense into him. You know what I'm saying? Whatnot, right? Because at the end of the day, again, I believe that she's the type of Skrull that's like Talos, and is a big picture one that sees that his actions, Gravik's actions, are only going to end up leading in defeat, and then all Skrulls on Earth are going to end up being basically hunted. They're going to be like the mutants with the Sentinels, essentially. You know what I'm saying? Like type deal. You know what I mean? Like that's how they're going to be tarnished.
You brought up an interesting point, Jeff, that I hadn't even considered, talking about Vera's relationship with Gravik kind of maybe being a motherly type figure there. Because if you think about it, she is the one who brought Gravik to Fury. And who knows if maybe she was kind of where Fury and her became kind of, I don't want to say like a father and mother figure to them. And maybe part of the reason why Gravik is so angry is that Fury never found him a planet, and then Fury blipped out. So there could be some misplaced anger there. And I think that may be one of the things we might see in some flashbacks in the next few episodes. But that is an excellent point, Jeff. And I had not even put my thought into that. So I got to give you some kudos there, man, because that is a great point. But guys, I'm going to phase shift this one more time so we can get to our final thoughts on the episode and thoughts of what we might see in next week's new episode of Secret Invasion.
Can I lead us off on this before we get into the final thoughts? I have an important question for both you and Jeff.
Okay.
So as we've been doing this show ever since, I think, was it WandaVision?
And we started with WandaVision, Phase 4 starting.
Yeah. My history, and I'm just going to repeat it here for people who don't know. I'm not the comic book guy. I am not familiar with the source that a lot of this series is based on. I'm invested in the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I always learn from you, Kyle, and people like you, Jeff, that are more familiar with it, and what they're bringing it from, and how they're giving their own twist and their own interpretation of this source material they're pulling from the comics. So I'm kind of actually curious, because obviously through the first 3 episodes, I've been a little underwhelmed with this series. But I want to ask you guys, based on the source material, right now where we are in episode 3, are you happy with what they've been doing, if any inspiration from the source material? Jeff?
Well, I'm going to two-part that. One, I am happy. Because I don't see how they could have done it any differently. I don't really, to be completely honest with you. Not the way that Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios plans ahead and lays things out. Right. I just don't see how they could have made it any. This is the best we could have gotten, I think, probably. Right. Unless they decided to swap things out and decide that they weren't going to do Secret Wars at all. Right. And like maybe do this instead. Or something like that, right? I don't know. What I'm saying? In the meantime, I think that's interesting, Kevin, because I forget these small things, which are actually big things, that you are, just like my co-host, Cybernetic Shark, more of a pure MCU fan in all aspects, in terms of pure as in not having the comic book background, but also pure in terms of having faith in the MCU and whatnot, right? Believing it, caring about it, whatnot, seeing it as something that's personal to you, whatnot, that matters to you, whatnot, to the point where like you can become let down, whatnot, right? As I do, and Kyle does, right? By certain decisions they make and whatnot, and how certain films or characters are done. Because we want better, right? We want to see things better the way we want to see them. At that point, the scuttlebutt was, and see, I just make this assumption, and I feel bad now, that you weren't happy with the series, and my automatic, and this is my fault. This is why. Hey, what do they say about assumptions? There you go. I'm like thinking to myself, oh well, Kevin probably is not happy with how they are delivering proper service to this event from a comic book standpoint, flushing it out. And this is based off me talking to Kyle too, right? In the fact that they're only giving it a 6-episode miniseries. This big event, right? When in all reality, you've been not so happy with the series itself, not necessarily. What you've been presented right in front of you has not been the same as what I've taken from it. And so at that point, I just want to apologize that I even had that false premise in my head established, and to say that again, I'm trying, brother. I'm learning. I'm evolving as a creator and as a friend and a man. So from that perspective. That's neat. I find that very interesting. It kind of changes the dynamic as far as like, our conversation or our rapport with this. But either way, yes, I think that, look, would it have been fun to see Spider-Woman and, with all these different characters thrown out into a full-on event across like, I don't know, 2 films or something, or however they would have done it? Yeah, it would have been awesome. But with the timing of where things are at in the MCU since Endgame, okay, we'll use that as a point, a metric, a point right there of date. So we're at now. With the direction they're going, I don't see how it would have made any sense anywhere logically to fit in some kind of real full Secret Invasion type deal from the comic books, from either variation, either orientation, and that's all I'm gonna say.
What about you, Kyle? Are you happy with the direction they're going thus far?
Well, first of all, I went like Jeff. I went in knowing there is no way they can do the comic book. It's just the logistics of it were impossible because there's too many characters, and how the story went in the comics was based around the superheroes and the superheroes being infiltrated, and there was characters that were key characters that they haven't even introduced in the MCU as of yet. So my hope was that I knew they were going to come in and do a version of this, and I think they made the right choice pulling it based off of the things we saw in Captain Marvel, using Nick Fury as the lead in that because he was an important part of the Secret Invasion miniseries itself. I think they've done a good job with that. What I think is, to me, is one of the drawback of this series for people like you, Kevin, where they can't pull all the stuff from the comic books, is that they're trying to write this for the MCU and for people who are still fans of the comics. So they're trying to keep some true elements into there. And I think in this is one of those times where, and it's happened a couple of times, I think in Phase 4, where trying to make it fit within the MCU and be based off the MCU history, but still trying to keep it relevant to the comic background it comes from and trying to be true to that has created some conflict and some confusion, especially for people who are only following the MCU. And I think that there are points in Secret Invasion where it is a little bit of that because the people who have read the comic have an idea of what the end game could possibly be and how it could work out. And they've mapped it out in their own head within how would they make this work within the MCU? And I think for somebody like you, Kevin, who hasn't yet, you don't necessarily have that ability to map it out because you're not familiar with the comic-based material. And I think that's just a problem with any comic book thing that we're at in this point, because we've gotten so deep past the surface of being able to pull off anything that we're dealing with the own history of the MCU and things like that. So the narratives have to change. And I think right now it's a state of confusion. And you add into the fact, and I truly believe this, that I think that a lot of stuff in the more recent MCU production has been a little bit more rushed because of circumstances beyond the creators' controls. And I think you're kind of feeling that with this series. I do think it has a chance to still finish with a strong ending, but it's got a lot of work to do in 3 episodes. And unless they are upping the episode time back closer to that 57 minutes an episode, I don't know if they can fully pull it off. I think they can give us some things, but the question will be is how much of what happens in Secret Invasion is going to carry over into future MCU projects, whether it's Captain America, Brave New World, the Thunderbolts, a few other things that might be coming out down the line as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But right now at the halfway point, I can understand why there's some confusion and maybe some I'm not feeling real sure about this right now. And I can understand that. I can respect it. What I would say is, though, I think it's worth sticking around for the ride because I do think that there's still a strong possibility they finish with a strong ending, even if it's not a quote bow wrapped up in a nice little bow. It does do some things that set up some new status codes for the MCU going forward. So with that, guys, let me ask you this, Jeff. I'll start with you on this. Do you have any predictions of what we might see in the next episode of Secret Invasion?
Predictions. I'd say that if what we've seen so far continues, you can expect that the title will connect heavily with the episode, its storyline, because they all have in every episode. If you go and look, every single title that they've had for every episode has directly correlated heavily and in a very tangible and actually well done way, right? Very in a sort of a deep way, to the full on storyline of each episode. It has, even in episode 3, it did, right? So, I mean, at that point, I believe that what we'll get is a full hour, right, for the next 3 episodes. For episode 4, starting with it off, we'll get a full hour of really great, solid television. right? That'll be enjoyable. There'll be some stuff that we're not going to expect. There's going to be some characters that we have not seen yet. They're going to be dropped into this series, and then the last, this second half of the series, right? There's going to be some characters we don't know yet that are going to pop up, but might even be some familiar ones that maybe we haven't seen in a while. We might get Rhodey as War Machine again for the first time in forever, which would be really dope. Does it happen in episode 4? I don't think so. But I'd say definitely that we'll see our first full version of Gravik as this new version of Super Skrull. Probably in episode 4, we'll see our first real skirmish, our first real full-blown action, right? Where we'll see that trailer shot where you'll see Mendelsohn and you'll see Talos and you'll see Fury with the machine guns and everything and whatnot. The helicopter chase deal, all that. I think that will go down in episode 4. I do.
Kevin, what about you? Do you have any predictions or what you would like to see in the next episode?
I'm going to start with like to see, because I realize what's not clicking with me with this series is that there really is no one that's likable and that you're rooting for, even this Fury. And usually, like, when you put together like a good espionage story, you might have a team that's likable. Like in Mission Impossible series, you like the IMF team. When you look back at Winter Soldier, you like the team. You like what's going on between Natasha and Steve Rogers, or Mr. Falcon himself, and what's happening there. You like the team. You like them, what's going on. And when you look at Talos and Fury, it's been confrontational, this whole series between these guys, and it's been an uncomfortable, uneasy alliance, and it's not paying off for me. And I need to see this grumpy version of Fury go away, and I'm hoping that we see that, and that there's, this is the best part about the MCU that I like, is when you get these character moments together and you love watching them together, whether there's some confrontational or banter stuff that's going back and forth. There's some type of charisma and something that brings it to the table other than just the action in this, and I'm hoping to see more of that, of what's going to happen next. I haven't paid attention to any of the trailers for the series because I don't want to spoil anything. And I really don't know what's going to happen at this point. I just want it to be better. I want it to smooth better. I want to root for something. I want to root for someone. And right now I'm just like, I'm trying to care, to be perfectly honest with you. And it's tough to say that with a character like Nick Fury and Ben Mendelsohn as the two main characters in this. And I'll be honest with you right now. Gaia's character, the actress's name, drawing a blank.
Amelia
right now.
Clark.
Yeah. She hasn't done it for me. Be perfectly honest with you.
She hasn't done much in this series. I think that's what would be one of my.
So I hope that this series turns around for the last 3 episodes, because I need it to get me to care. I feel like as of lately, the MCU is catering towards the comic book fans. So even though they're not giving you an exact interpretation of what they did in the comics, they're relying on the comic book fans as a crutch to be a little more invested into it. And I think they're letting the non-comic book fans kind of hanging in the wind a little bit, if that makes sense.
Jeff, you had a thought you wanted to throw in there?
Well, I can tell you, Kev, you and I could have we can do a whole show just on what you just said right there, because I have the complete opposite belief in terms of like as a comic book fan, I don't feel rewarded whatsoever by anything that they did in Phase 4 whatsoever. I don't feel like if you wanted me to become one of those people that was all I cared about was comic book accuracy, which I have people like that on our shows. I do. They just go crazy on that. That's all they want to talk about, and they're pissed off, whatever. If I was that one of those people, I would not be happy with the MCU at all right now. You know what I'm saying right now, as far as what they've given me. But to bounce off on a positive note, you made it very clear. Your expectation is very simple and it's very fair. And it should not be hard for Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios to deliver. You just like episode 4 to be better, right? That should not be that difficult. and that is not much to expect either. It really is. Let's be honest here. I'm sorry, but like if it gets to the point where that expectation is a struggle to be handled and delivered for you, then we'll have to have a show and discuss whatever major problems are going down here, because there's a serious breakdown at that point. And honestly, brother, as your friend, I wish you liked the series more. You know what I mean? I hope episode 4 does deliver for you. I do.
I see. That's the thing. I had higher expectations for the show. There's certain projects that I've gone into where I've just gone in with low expectations, and either they met those or they exceeded them. And I actually had higher expectations because I love espionage stuff, and I was excited to see Fury return. So it hasn't met my expectations, I guess. So
Jeff, you brought up an interesting point, and I think it actually hits one of the biggest nails on the head. That's been a problem for the MCU in Phase 4. Is I think they haven't figured out how to balance these projects out enough to write them for both the comic book fan and the MCU fan. And I think what's happening is that's showing, because instead of getting something that's kind of direct in one way or another, you're kind of left in these areas, shades of gray thing. Like they couldn't quite figure out the direction they wanted to go with it. And I think both sides are feeling it. And
they were doing it well. They were doing it really well for a long time. They were making that balance work.
Yeah, right? And I think it was.
Go ahead.
I would even say the beginning of Phase 2 or Phase 4 was hitting on some pretty good cylinders, but it feels like in probably the last year and a half or so, it's been going a little bit more and more off the rails because they can't find the balance of what to do with that.
Disney Plus impacted it a lot.
Yeah, I think so too. I think for me with what's remaining in Secret Invasion, I'm going to throw this out. I think episode 4 is going to be dealing a lot with Fury and Vera and Gravik's interpersonal relationship. We're going to see some flashbacks that show that. I think it's going to try to set up some of the things that explain why his feelings towards Fury at this point. And also I think we'll see on the main plot, I'll see what happens with Gaia. And I think we see Gravik really unleash his master plan by the end of the episode. I think what's going to end up happening throughout the rest of the series is that obviously Gravik's plan will get foiled in some way or changed in some way. And what's going to happen is you have all these high-end political figures that have been captured by the Skrulls that are going to get freed at some point. And having all of this Skrull infiltration and all these political leaders coming back, who knows how long some of them have been replaced, is going to lead into events that are going to set up how things are going to play out in Captain America: Brave New World, and will also be one of the reasons for the founding of the Thunderbolts and lead into some things for the upcoming Thunderbolts film. So I go back to where I see this show. It might not wrap up with a complete bow on it, but I think it's definitely going to have a little bit of a bow on it and set up the stage for some big Marvel projects going forward. It's just a matter of how they execute it and how they pull it off. And I think that is going to be the biggest question. But with that, guys, it is time to wrap up this episode of True Believers. First of all, a thank you to our great guest, Jeff, Mr. True Knowledge himself, for joining us. And
thanks for coming on, man.
Helping us investigate some Skrull chicanery in this week's episode.
Hey, this is a hugging you guys, myself moment. All right.
We appreciate it. And of course, too, if you are looking for the True Believers podcast, if you're watching right now on video, that means you're watching on the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel. So please like, subscribe, and share it out. If you're listening to the audio version of this, you found us, whether it's on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com or on any of the big podcast catchers out there, from iTunes to iHeartRadio to Spotify to so many others. Of course, too, you can visit the True Believers Facebook group to get all the latest information on what is happening in the MCU. And of course, visit the Fandom Podcast Network's Facebook page as we keep you updated in all things fandom. And of course, you can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Twitter at FanPod Network or on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network. You can also find myself on Twitter at AKyleW or on Instagram at AKyleFandom. Kevin, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and now Threads at Spartan_Phoenix on all those platforms.
And Jeff, where can people find you out there in the Bleeding Edge MCU show on YouTube?
Well, I mean, you can find me at the Magnolia Foot and Body Spa massage parlor later on. if you need to find me quickly, directly. But besides that, hey man, you tell me. We're the MCU's Bleeding Edge. You just go to some platform and put us in, and we're there. So it's pretty much that simple. MCU'sBleedingEdge.org, baby. What's up?
Yeah, and trust me, they hold nothing back on that show, but it's a lot of fun, and they got some people who bring some good knowledge, some true knowledge, and some great information. Shout out to Cybershark, your good buddy and co-host there. So, gentlemen, it has been an absolute pleasure talking with you guys. Thanks again so much. Thank you to all of our listeners out there. And until next time, as we always say, Excelsior and make ours Marvel.